So, this is your friendly, dangerous dinosaur. I'm broadcasting right now from the Royal Caribbean ship Allure of the Seas, which I've been on for 2 weeks now. And it's been very interesting talking to all the passengers and the help and things like that, and regarding a lot of the changes that have been going on, the politics that have been going on, and the way politics are interpreted. One of the things that really concerns me is many of you know I've studied the intelligence community now for 50 years. My younger brother was intimately connected with them, with spooks did, and because of various cases that I had and various clients that belonged to both organized crime and to the CIA, I've had much experience in this. One of the things that has really bothered me for the last 50 years is there seems to be a concerted attack on our Constitution and our way of governance, everything else. And another thing is I've studied psychological warfare tactics of the government for quite some time. One of the companies that I was chairman of made electroencephalographs, and our customer was the Pentagon, more specifically the Defense Intelligence Agency. Our liaison guy was a 3-star general named Albert Stubblebine, and Albert Stubblebine ran the Psychic Warrior group that did remote viewing and things such as this. So I've been studying that stuff for many decades. Another activity I was with the cattle mutilation group with Linda Howell heads that up. And the interesting thing about General Stubblebine is his wife worked for Stanford Research Institute, and she studied anomalous behavior. And essentially that was a name for flying saucer abductions. So it's crossed back and forth all my career. And it started with the Tannenbaum Rhea case, if you want to look that up. But that was in 1969 or 70, thereabouts. So we're on board, and we get off every port. And on every port, we go through a security check. And to get back on, you've got to have another security check. And they do this little wipe thing to make sure you got no explosive or drugs. And they want to make sure you have no weapons and all this kind of shit. But it's all theater. If you really watch the behavior, they're really not doing anything other than going through motions so that the passengers can feel safe. Now, I don't really feel particularly safe if I've got a dumbass actor playing the part of security rather than real security. So I've tested them a few times. One of the times I went through, and unfortunately, many of us at a certain age get an urgency to go to the bathroom. So I was coming back on board, and I'm in one of these mobility scooters because I can't really walk too much anymore. And I got my scooter on board, and they don't really check the scooters that much. I think maybe if they think once you're 80 years old, you can't do much damage anyway. I'd like to think they misjudged me, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, I'm coming on board, and they signal me through, and some courthouses use wands and all this kind of shit. And what they typically do is they do what they call a pat down. But if you're in the scooter, it's not much of a pat down because it can't reach certain areas. And then they run a piece of paper or whatever, and they test it for chemicals. And they make a big show of it, as much ado about nothing. So I was sort of hastening on board, and the security guy says, "Can I do a pat search?" And I said, I'd rather you do a strip search because I got to go to the bathroom. Can we do it in the bathroom? Of course, he copped an attitude. And he said, well, go on through. And then he said, but I got to examine your cell phone. I don't know what the hell he wanted to examine his cell phone, but it seemed to me, in his mind, if he skips certain checks, he should do the other part of the check. So I gave him the cell phone and proceeded to the bathroom. Now the ships have facial recognition, they have all this other kind of stuff. This was toward the end of a 2-week cruise. I'm sure they knew who I was or could have found out easily. Like I said, they have photo recognition when you go on and off. They scan your little pass and it shows your photograph on it. In any event, the security guard decided to hold on to the phone, and he knew I was in the bathroom, but he didn't even go in there. He just put it in lost and found. So a little later that evening, it was obvious that my cell phone wasn't going to come back. And the problem I have with the cell phone, I got these brand new hearing aids, and I paid more to have them accessible to my cell phone, so I could control the volume, the direction, all kinds of cute little things that cost a lot of extra money, and I don't really see where it was worth the price I paid for it. But again, that's a different matter. Anyway, I get up to my cabin, and my cell phone's downstairs at security, and I can't hear because I can't turn on my hearing aid. So a little while later, I go to the front desk and I said, I need my cell phone. Have you got it in lost and found? Well, he wanted me to describe it. And I said, well, my CPAS is on it. If you let me open what you've got there, one that looks like mine, you can see with my photo ID and everything that is my phone. Well, he explained that he couldn't do it that way, that I had to describe it, and then he would bring on out that fit the description. Well, I've never been a member of the paper cult, cargo cult, or any of those things. I suppose I'm sloppy on a lot of things. I don't know what I have or how to describe what I have. Anyway, I couldn't describe my cell phone, so they wouldn't give it to me. In the meantime, he was trying to understand, or I was trying to understand what he was saying. And in the background, they had this god-awful rock and roll band. And they have the volume there probably 10 decibels above hysteria because they want to placate the crowd that comes in. And it's like what they call Broadway, or it's the main promenade. And they've got all kinds of shops, and they play all this music for people and have live orchestras. And amateur musicians typically like to play full volume, almost at the feedback level, because they don't know music from noise. But again, that's a different matter. So I couldn't understand without my hearing aid what the hotel desk clerk was trying to say. He got frustrated. I got frustrated. So I asked for a pen and paper and went to a little snack area, and I wrote out what happened, and I wrote out this happened. I went ashore. I came back. I had this continent urgency. The security guy let me by, but since he couldn't pat me down, he asked for my cell phone. I gave it to him, and I wanted it back because I couldn't hear a damn thing with the noise. Could they either take me to a room where I could understand by reading lips what was going on? The other thing is that people wore masks, and I can't read lips if somebody's got a mask on. So I was just totally dysfunctional. This process took, from the time I went to the front desk, about a half hour later, it took at least an hour altogether. So I go through the line like 4 or 5 times, trying to make people understand. Finally, in frustration, I leave because I was about ready to go postal. I was frustrated. Nobody seemed to understand what I wanted. or they pretended they didn't understand, or it was too much bother, or it wasn't in their book of manuals, or whatever it was. I couldn't get through to anybody. So a passenger I knew said, "What's the matter, Dennis?" And I said, "Well, this is my situation, and it's so goddamn noisy down there. I can't hear what the clerks are saying, and I don't think I can't make them understand. I wrote it out for them, and they said they couldn't read my writing." So this woman disappears. A little while later, a clerk came back to where I was at the elevator, which was a little quieter, and I explained my situation, and he takes me to the front desk and tries to explain to the front desk. However, it was too loud for the front desk to hear him too. Finally, after another 15 or 20 minutes, we get through the thing. They bring me my cell phone, and I show them. They weren't going to give it to me, and I said, "I can prove it's my phone." I push the thing, and they have this. Royal Caribbean has an app, and I show them the app with my name and CPAS and number and things like that. Something like that shouldn't take a whole goddamn hour, but it did. And again, this is part of how we're being ripped off and how people are looking at substance, and they're looking at a check sheet, and they're playing like they know what they're doing, and they're placating people. Now, the security guard didn't catch anybody violating anything. They knew they weren't going to catch anything, so they were sloppy. And that is no way to run a railroad in my estimation, because somebody could slip by. Either you're going to randomly check or whatever. You're not going to put on a charade, because it causes people to trust the charade. And what if they're that sloppy and something happens? Well, we did this. Well, bullshit. You didn't do anything. You put on a performance for the benefit of gullible passengers, is what you did. So I think we ought to look at that and again demand that if you're going to do something, do it right. One of the things that really bothers me is half-assed jobs, and this is really a half-assed job. And I don't know how much they pay the security, but I know they've got skaters. They have a skater performance. They have a theater. They have a musical. They have all kinds of performers. And maybe they could chop down some of the performers, particularly in the security operation, and save the passengers a little money, or recover some of the losses over COVID. It's hard to say. The other thing I've noticed on this trip is the staff is not as well trained, but I can blame that on the turnover with the COVID and things like that. The food quality is far inferior to what I've had in the past. And it seems like most people don't even try to satisfy the customers. They dismiss us. So another thing that happened today is, as many of you know, I started out my career as a barber. And in fact, I was looking on my photographs. I got a picture of my license dating from 1965. I think it was, 1962 is when I became a licensed barber. And I was a union official, etc. Now, there's a difference between the way barbers cut hair and the way cosmetologists cut hair. Cosmetologists cut hair in order to do hairstyling and things like this. Barbers cut hair for a certain way and for evenness, etc., for even growth. So I specifically, when I get a cut on ship or anywhere, I ask, are they barbers or cosmetologists? And I said, I don't want a cosmetologist. I don't have to pay to straighten up a haircut. That isn't done to my liking. So they say, yeah, we have barbers, we have both. Give me an appointment with the barber. I got an appointment with the barber. Went down there, and the guy starts cutting hair, and right away you can tell he's not a barber. And I said, you're not a barber, you're a cosmetologist. He says, well, I cut hair. I said, well, that's not the point. The point is you're training in how you cut hair. I know you can cut hair. As prison people, give them a pair of clippers. They cut hair too. That doesn't make them a barber. Or people going into the service. It used to be anybody would cut hair. I specifically said I wanted a barber, and I asked if I could have one. He says, well, I'm not a barber. If you want a barber, I'll give you you can talk to my partner at an hour and a half from now. He's a barber. So I wait around for an hour and a half to get a haircut. I go in there, and he starts out, and I says, you're not a barber, are you? Well, I'm trained to cut hair. So neither one of them answered the question as such. Both of them tried to deceive. And although they did a fairly adequate job, they didn't cut the hair the way I wanted it to cut. And they deliberately lied because they can get away with it. And that's another thing. You've got all these deceptive practices going on. And people lie right and left because they don't think you know any better, or because they don't think it matters, or because they think they can get away with it. I don't know. In any event, I finally get a haircut. The guy butchered it up a little bit. Then he was going to use thinning shears on it to correct his mistakes, and I wouldn't let him. I said I'd rather have it done at home and done right than have it further botched. But this is stuff I see all the time. And one of the things that really made me curious, I'm at we belong to the frequent flyer club type thing on the ship here. And I'm talking to this fellow from, I think it's Tennessee or Kentucky or whatever. He's well-to-do and fairly bright. He was educated. I think he was a CPA or something like that. And he's telling me what he expects out of life. And he said the biggest thing he expects out of life is security. People don't care about democracy that much. They don't care about the Constitution. They just want to be safe because the government sells fear, like Procter & Gamble sells soap. And because they sell fear, they can extort certain things. And I think what we're seeing here is the consequences of a fair society. You can pull a scam on security because people are afraid, and if you put on a show that makes them think they could be safe, whether they're safe or not, or whether it's related to any kind of reality or not, is immaterial. As long as they feel that way and believe that way, then they can get away with it. So you have a whole majority of people who'd rather feel safe than defend the Constitution even. So you kind of wonder what happened before the whole safety thing. We'll probably go more into this later. I will say that I started my career out with some of the top criminal defendants in the country. I defended organized crime figures, and at that time the Justice Department wouldn't even bother going out and arresting them. They would call certain attorneys that, if they knew we were representing certain clients, and they'd say, hey, are you representing so-and-so? I'd say yes. They said, well, we got an indictment or we got a warrant. Wouldn't you want to bring him in? It was easier for them. It was easier for me. We could bring him in, surrendering, post the bond, and get processed, and nobody had to get in a shooting match. And nobody even thought, dealing with the mafia, that you'd get in a shooting match. That came later with the Nixon administration, where they wanted to put performance on and do perp walks and all this kind of stuff, and change the Constitution. And what they actually did, and I'll go into this at length in some of my further ones, is they've changed our legal system from an accusatorial common law system to that of an inquisitorial system, where everybody's determined to be a potential bad guy, and we don't want to take any chances. It's like the witch hunt of Cotton Mather days, where it says it's better to drown 100 innocent people than let one witch go free. And that's sort of where we are again now. Only the witches are criminals, and most of the criminals that the label as witches were drug criminals, and the only thing they really did was compete against the CIA on prices. But again, that's another cynical view. So I think we should examine, particularly when we're going to have a whole brand new structuring of government after this next election, and democracy itself is at stake, and the belief in government is at stake, and we could go either way. We could go pro-democracy or pro-fascism, and the problem is that the propagandists on one party are promoting fascism under the guise of safety and protection and things like this. So the government is actually running a protection racket. The people in power are running a protection racket, and they're trying to extort money by virtue of taxes from us on the basis that they're making us safe, and they're protecting us, and all kinds of happy horseshit. That really isn't the case. So we should be aware of that, be aware of the promises, and then look at things and compare what used to be with what is now. And if you really get in and research things, you'll find that there's a big lie that's continued since the middle 60s on. It started with the Vietnam War and has gone on from then. I can remember growing up, I didn't have to pay for school because the government paid for it. Why did the government pay for it? We were keeping up with the Russians. Russians sent up Sputnik, we followed. And the really interesting thing back then is under the Eisenhower administration, top income earners were in an 80% tax bracket. And you didn't hear belly aching about taxes. Now you got people in a 30% tax bracket say the biggest enemy is taxes. They want to pay taxes. They don't want to do this, but they want protection. They want to be safe. But they want to be safe for free, I guess. Anyway, I'm rambling, and I'm probably boring the shit out of everybody, and I don't really care. What I would like is, I'd like some feedback. Please tell me how bad I am, or how inane I am, or whatever you feel like. But I do want to hear from you. I want to know what I can do to make my presentations better, if possible. This is Dangerous Dinosaur signing off.